The story begins with our protagonist, Ikta Solork, enjoying his favorite place, a hammock, where he is approached by a little being, a spirit of light called Kus, who warns him that he should stop being a lazy bum because he might miss the boat he needs to board. Later, we meet this girl, Yatorishino Igsem. They are preparing for an examination to enter the military, as the Katjvarna Empire, where they live, is currently engaged in a war with the Kioka Republic, though the war seems to be somewhat at a standstill. Ikta and Yatori have been friends for a while, but that doesn't stop Ikta from making seemingly pessimistic comments about Katjvarna. He believes that the empire will eventually fall because they have more defensive power than offensive power. Before we continue, let's talk a bit about Yatori. She comes from a family of legendary swordsmen who have served the empire for years. Despite Ikta not wanting to join the military, he is taking the examination for her. As I mentioned earlier, Ikta and Yatori already knew each other before, as they used to live together, but I'll explain that later. Upon boarding the ship, they meet Haroma Becker, whom they call Haro, who plans to become a combat medic. Also on the ship is Matthew, whom Ikta and Yatori know from school. He belongs to the Tetojirichi family, which used to be an important family. On the other hand, Ikta introduces himself to Haro and tries to show off a bit, but Yatori stops him. Finally, they meet this guy named Torway Remion, and Yatori will make sure Ikta doesn't do anything foolish. The journey continues, and at one point, a blonde girl knocks on the door but leaves without saying much. Everything would have gone smoothly, and they would have reached their destination peacefully if they hadn't been caught in a strong storm that causes the ship to sink. They have no choice but to abandon it. As the girl from earlier descends, she falls into the water and seems likely to die, but Ikta asks Kus to act as a beacon while he dives to rescue her. He manages to save her, and they are all safe. They discover the identity of the girl. She is Princess Chamille, the heir of the empire. Although they were saved from drowning, they find refuge in a cave near the sea. Chamille Kitora Katjvanmaninik, let's just call her Chamille. Despite being a child, she has an excellent memory and remembers the time she visited Yatori's home. Meanwhile, Ikta and Torway scout the area and realize they are in enemy territory, in the Kioka Republic. The group discusses their options for leaving, but Chamille refuses to remain a prisoner and makes a scene, demanding they cross the border. Ikta knows it's easier said than done and decides to stay put for now, setting up some traps. Ikta improvises a hammock with some leaves because they may be lost, but he won't be uncomfortable. Later, he spots a balloon, a new vehicle used in Kioka, so they return to the cave to avoid being seen. Night falls, and Chamille needs to go to the bathroom, and it could have gone well, but she encounters some soldiers. The group notices this and goes to her rescue. It seems like they will catch Chamille, but Ikta steps in and surrenders himself. He claims to be a deserter from the empire seeking refuge in Kioka, accompanied by his mother. The guards plan to let them in, but when Ikta learns how many of them there are, he stops playing games, and they start attacking. They defeat the soldiers after betraying them, and one of them is still alive. Ikta asks him questions about their location in the balloon, promising to treat him if he answers, but he responds and is left untreated. At least Ikta takes responsibility for the 3 spirits that were accompanying them. After the incident, Torway gets intense because he missed a shot, but Yatori calms him down. On the other hand, Chamille regrets that they had to kill the soldiers and becomes somewhat unhinged, wanting a kind of punishment and drawing blood. However, after Ikta tastes the blood and tells her that the things she talks about are unscientific, she calms down. Yes, Ikta Solork is quite twisted. Well, yes, Solork. But he's not such a bad guy, you know? He feels bad about what he did, but he understands that they had no choice. The next morning, they reach the balloon, planning to use it as a tool to cross the border, but not everyone can get in, so they have to improvise. At a Kioka military camp, a general receives our group, with Ikta disguised as a guard. The plan is to take advantage of the fact that balloons are expensive and valuable to negotiate with the Kioka people. So, they create a whole story where the rest of the group were individuals who tried to steal the balloon, and one of them escaped in it. The person who stole the balloon demands that the entire group be safe for him to hand it over. The guards are supposed to eliminate anyone who crosses the borders, but fortunately, Ikta, with his manipulative side, manages to deceive them, and they all pass, but not with everything. Their weapons are all in the balloon and are considered lost. Fortunately, the princess's ring was not on the balloon. Speaking of Princess Chamille, they managed to take her back to the castle, where they couldn't believe they were in Kioka territory. Chamille introduces the group that saved her. A month later, Ikta and his companions are staying in a luxurious hotel, which Ikta finds boring. They are receiving this treatment for saving the princess. Yatori really wants another chance to take the examination, but it's unclear why they aren't given another opportunity. The ship they were on literally sank, after all. Torway arrives with news that the day they returned with the princess, they met General Remion, whom Ikuta tried to confront to make him understand that the war is staged, and the military wants people to believe it's serious. Remion didn't listen, and guess what? He died in the front line. Although Remion died, many soldiers managed to escape. The group is summoned to the old cathedral in the capital to meet the emperor, which Ikuta is not happy about. The emperor is a man with a zombie-like face, and he is Chamille's father. He thanks them for saving his daughter and grants each of them the title of Imperial Knights, their reward. Everyone is surprised, except for Ikuta, who is annoyed. Now they will attend the school for high-ranking officers. Ikuta thanks Chamille for disrupting all his plans. What happened to them is unprecedented. They became Imperial Knights in an unconventional manner. Chamille mentions that what happened with them is the only joy the people have, so she used them for political purposes. Chamille also finds out more about Ikuta. Remember when he was introduced as Ikta Solork? Well, his real identity is Ikta Sankre, and not only that, she also investigated his father, Bada Sankre, who used to be one of the best generals but was arrested for not following orders and died in prison. She also researched the person Ikuta calls his master, Dr. Annalie Khan, who taught him about science and defected to Kioka. But that's not all. She knows about his mother, Yuka Sankre, a woman who was invited from Kioka to be part of a harem and was later handed over to Ikuta's father. Speaking of him, he threatens Chamille to stop talking about his mother or face death. Later on, some guards managed to recover the weapons that were on the balloon. It was an order from Remion before he departed from this world. Ikuta and Yatori talk, and although it was one of the best days for her, for Ikuta, it was the worst, as he has become everything he never wanted to be against his will. After this, the group is taken to the military school, where they are introduced to everyone. There they encounter a group of idiots who throw an insect at Ikuta's food, which could have worked well, except that moments later Ikuta eats it as if nothing happened. They attack him, but he manages to escape using cuss, and then Yatori steps in and beats them up. Torway's brother, who is among the bullies, threatens Ikuta. 3 months later, they attend a meeting where each one is put in charge of a platoon of Imperial soldiers. Ikuta is assigned to a group that includes a girl who knows him well. Her name is Suya Mitkalif, and she knows him because Ikuta had an affair with her mother in the past. While Ikuta observes his platoon, Torway's brother is only thinking about getting revenge on him and teach him a lesson, and he plans to do it during the battle simulations, where 6 platoons are divided into 2 groups and fight with paint bullets. The organizers of the simulation set up the groups strategically to provoke them. Matthew is worried, but Ikuta reassures him, saying that they have already gone through a real experience where their lives were at risk, so this is just a simulation. Ikuta wants to turn this situation into an opportunity, so he talks to Suya to offer advice to her platoon. She doesn't want to listen to him, not because of the affair with her mother but because she sees Ikuta's physical skills as inferior and doesn't think he's fit to lead. Suya believes it's difficult to win the simulation due to their lack of experience, so Ikuta seizes the chance to tell her that if he leads them to victory, it means he's a better commander than her. Suya agrees, and the simulation begins. Ikuta guides the whole platoon, making them get rid of part of their equipment, which is part of his plan. They quickly reach their destination, surprising Suya, who thinks Ikuta has been there before. There, Ikuta will set up a battlefield to give them an advantage. Second day of the military exercise, Torway's brother was waiting there for Ikuta and his group, thinking it would be a place where they have the advantage. However, Yatori appears to inform him that they are camping somewhere else and that there were never direct or specific orders about the location of the confrontation. The brother then moves his platoon south, where they would finally meet Ikuta. This simulation was the first time Ikuta revealed a bit of his brilliance as a leader. Returning to the battle simulation, Torway's brother mobilizes his troops, not knowing what's coming. Yatori, who was on his side, follows his orders, knowing it will be a piece of cake for Ikuta. The brother believes Ikuta plans to attack from behind, but Yatori tells him that it's strange that they were given the advantage, so splitting up would be a mistake, but he doesn't care. Torway manages to eliminate a few of them and gives the signal for Ikuta and the others to start the attack. Despite a river separating them, Ikuta planned to build a hidden bridge using the muddy waters of the river, confusing the brothers group who thought they were walking on water or something. With the numerical advantage, they almost defeat the brother, but Yatori returns, and both teams retreat. I don't know why they didn't take advantage of the retreat to eliminate some of the enemies, but as I'm not a military strategist, I won't comment. 2 hours later, Ikuta's platoon rests, and he asks Haro to attend to the wounded while telling the rest that they will change formation. The princess comes to see what's happening, but Ikuta tells her to leave. The brother regrets and blames Yatori, as if he hadn't been the one who made the decision to split up in the first place. Anyway, he plans to ambush them. On the other hand, Ikuta decides not to pursue them because he knows the brother is desperate for revenge. An hour passes, and they are informed that Ikuta's platoon has blocked their way out, so they have nowhere to escape. They head straight to Ikuta. The brother plans to cheat and go directly for Ikuta, but guess what? He doesn't get anywhere because he's eliminated by none other than Torway. This starts the final confrontation, and Torway assumes command, and they continue fighting. Time passes, and although they didn't finish off everyone as some fled, they technically won. Ikuta scolds the opponents and then addresses everyone, saying that the best warriors are the ones who loaf around. He also asks them if they want easy and lazy lives to follow him. This leads to everyone cheering for him, and eventually, Ikuta would be recognized as the undefeated lazy general. Everything could have ended peacefully there, but some saw Chamille going to a strange place. She was ambushed there along with some guards by this guy, and Chamille ends up kidnapped. Despite the humiliation, Torway's brother refuses to give up. In the end, he has no choice, as Yatori hears a sound and realizes that Chamille is in danger. She informs the rest of the soldiers to mobilize and rescue her. The ones who kidnapped Chamille thought they would get away with it, but they were quickly ambushed, and not only that, before finishing his sentence, the leader already had Yatori ready to cut his throat. The leader explains his motives, and it turns out they used to be students of the late Recon. Since they knew their mentor died due to political negligence, they wanted revenge by targeting the princess. Despite being injured, the leader catches Yatori, but a distant shot gives her the advantage again, allowing her to defeat all the deserters. Ikuta arrives at the scene and jokes that he won't be able to eat tomatoes for a while due to the mess that was made. He then calms Yatori down and reminds her that she is his right-hand woman. Ikuta asks the dying deserter for an explanation, and upon hearing his motives, the deserter says that Ikuta's strategies are similar to his father's. Well, the good thing is that Chamille is safe. As I mentioned earlier, Ikuta and Yatori lived together for a while, and that's what we'll see now. But before that, Yatori is afraid of how she acted when she eliminated that group of people, telling herself that she won't become a sword. But anyway, let's get to it. When Yatori was little, her father suggested that she study abroad, based on a recommendation from Bada, Ikuta's father. Since her father seems not to care about her going to live with strangers, he lets her decide and leave without much to say, except that she must never forget that she belongs to the Igsem family. And if it was Bada's recommendation, of course, that's where she met young Ikuta, who first welcomes her to the world of science. In those days, thanks to the work of Dr. Annalie, they had developed a prototype of a balloon, somewhat different from the one used in Kioka at present, in which Ikuta is flying. The doctor is the representative of the scientists, and he explains a bit about science to Yatori, who quickly understands. When it comes to science, yes, making such a delicious dessert requires some science too. Despite still being a child, she comes from the Igsem family. Therefore, at her young age, she is a deadly swordsman, so much so that she almost accidentally beheaded Ikuta. Ikuta tells her that she is too formal for her age, which is understandable since Ikuta was the first person her age that Yatori knew back then. Ikuta's father assigns them some missions to do together, the first of which is to make this guy fall into a hole. At first, it seems like they failed because the first two holes were pretty obvious, but there was a third one, and the bald guy falls into it. First mission accomplished. The next mission is to steal ingredients from the kitchen of this lady with an unfriendly face. Yatori asks to take care of it herself and proves to be not only a skilled swordsman but also agile at stealing. Ikuta takes her to his home, where we meet his mother, and Yatori greets her as if she were a military person. Bada arrives home and asks Ikuta about the remaining missions. Speaking of missions, let's continue because the next one is to catch this enormous fish. It's then when Yatori tells Ikuta that her intention is to become a soldier, to which he mentions that she should become a scientist like him, but she refuses, wanting to follow the path of a soldier. Ikuta believes it's something imposed on her, so he tries to make her decide for herself. Yatori thinks it's none of his business, but Ikuta mentions that without his help, she won't be able to uncover the world's secrets, and monsters will eat her. After a while, they end up alone in a cabin, where they are surrounded by a wolf. Without saying a word, Yatori throws an axe at the wolf, but wolves don't attack alone, they come in packs. These wolves are not in good shape, but they don't care. They want to get rid of them, so when the others come back to search for them, they won't be harmed. Their mission is to kill or scare away the wolves, so they set traps for them, and I have to say, I feel bad for the wolves. The rest of the pack moves away a bit, giving them time to rest. The wolves, despite being sluggish, have an intelligent leader who won't give up, so they surround the cabin again, and Yatori takes care of several more. Although Ikuta doesn't like the idea of killing them, he has no choice. The wolf leader manages to enter the cabin but falls into a trap, and the two hide. Yatori starts babbling that he should escape while she dies, but the truth is that 1 or 2 dead is equally bad. It also applies to the wolves, but since they are not protagonists, nothing happens to them. In all the time they've spent together, Ikuta learned that if they work together, they can overcome anything. At that moment, they unite to the point where Ikuta becomes Yatori's left hand, and she becomes his right. They come up with another plan. Ikuta sets the cabin on fire, and when the wolves come out, they deal with them. It seems that the leader got trapped in the fire, but that's not the case. He doesn't give up and attacks them. Ikuta spits blood at one of them to temporarily blind it, and Yatori proves she's Yatori by engaging in a one-on-one fight with the leader, who ends up badly injured but alive. Well, at least not all the wolves were killed, but the ones they killed got eaten. Ikuta insists that being a soldier is not the only option she can consider. After this, everything went downhill because they arrested Bada, and from Yatori's point of view, Ikuta and his mother disappeared. Some time later, Ikuta and Yatori reunite, and the first thing he does is tell her that he's here to take her away from that hopeless place. Now back to the present, Matthew is playing shogi with Haro. She tells him that if he's so good, he should be able to beat Ikuta, but no, every time they've played, he loses. In fact, they consider both Ikuta and Yatori to be on a completely different level, although Matthew wants to surpass them. Meanwhile, Torway is practicing with the rifle to improve his aim, and Ikuta, well, he's being lazy, as usual, but hey, this time he's not in a hammock. Ikuta tells Haro that they are about to open Annalie's box, which contains all the results of his experiments and research. The group will soon head to the so-called northern region, a place located on a mountain inhabited by the Cynic. Ikuta had been there before with Annalie to investigate the mountain's climate. He also mentions certain customs of the inhabitants there, and knowing Ikuta, it can't be anything decent. In fact, almost as indecent as the comment he made to Haro about her curves earlier. Now, we meet this friendly girl, Kana, who loves books. Anyway, the group arrives at the northern base, where they are greeted by this man named Safita. We also meet Major Toad, who looks like he might leave for heaven anytime soon, but no, he won't leave just yet. Ikuta knows that he is the one in charge of giving orders in that place. Ikuta meets Senpa, who is part of a platoon that uses illumination spirits. Senpa laughs at Ikuta, saying he looks anything but a leader, but there's no time for that because Diinken enters the scene. I'm not sure where he came from, but without saying a word, he challenges Yatori to a sword duel since he knows her last name. Safita lets them fight there without any objections. Chamille thinks it's a vulgar scene, but Ikuta explains that it's a ceremony that happens whenever an Igsem joins a base. You see, the Igsem have a fighting style with 2 swords, but Yatori refuses to fight that way. She prefers to fight with 1 sword because they need to continue showing their superiority as Igsem to protect the Empire's order. It seems like the guy has the upper hand, but Yatori easily defeats him, and then they all chill and shake hands. Senpa guides everyone as they climb the mountain, telling them that their work there is to keep the Cynic mountain people at bay. Despite living in the Empire, they are not from Katjvarna, so they had minor conflicts with them in the past, but supposedly, now they are at peace. Spoiler alert, they are not at peace. Senpa thinks he's leading everyone, except for Ikuta, who apparently broke the rules and willingly locked himself in the dungeon because he couldn't be bothered to go. Let's go back to Kana. I told you she loves books, right? Well, this old man wants to take her favorite books under the excuse that they were written by the deserter Annalie. At that moment, Ikuta appears to expose the old man, who basically wanted to take advantage of the book's success to steal and sell them in the black market. The old man gets violent, but he didn't count on Ikuta's special weapon, which this time is not a centipede but a spider. After getting rid of the old man, Ikuta introduces himself to Kana, and they start talking about the books, but they can't finish the conversation because Senpa appears to punish Ikuta for skipping the training. Senpa takes Ikuta to the dungeon, and later, in one of the cells, Ikuta finds many spirits imprisoned, belonging to the Cynic. Senpa explains to Ikuta that no matter how bad he is following Safita's direct orders. How could the Cynic be at peace if they stripped all of them of their spirits? Safita is quite the hypocrite. The Cynic are not at peace at all. In fact, this girl leads a revolution to reclaim lands that supposedly belonged to them before the so-called Grand Alifatra, the Ladder of God. They were a group that protected the Empire from any external danger for years, but now they will choose the path of violence. At the base, Diinken criticizes Torway for his skill level of 0 in handling a sword, as he believes Torway won't be able to protect Chamille if he doesn't know how to use it. It shows once again how technologically behind they are within the Empire. They might as well fight with sticks and stones. Chamille helps Torway see reason and tells him that he is skilled with the rifle, so he doesn't need to learn to use the sword. Diinken gets even angrier when Torway beats him at shogi. Later, Ikuta returns to the base looking like a dead man. He had been locked in the dungeon for days because Senpa forgot to let him out. Yutori accompanies Toak and a group of soldiers to escort merchandise. Hidden in a carriage is Ikuta, who meets Kana again and resumes their previous conversation about books and goes for a walk in the village. Kana thinks Ikuta is someone who always goes after women, but he defends himself, saying that, in reality, women conspire to pursue him. Very believable, indeed. Contrary to what Ikuta thought, people there seem to have no problems with the soldiers. Kana tells Ikuta that General Safida is in charge of giving orders regarding the Cynic, as he enjoys being cruel to them. Kana tells Ikuta that in the books, the Cynic talk about spirits without mentioning God, but who is God? Yes, it's Alderamin, just like in the title, and yet, everyone says that God sent the spirits to Earth. Toak reaches his destination, where he asks Yutori to go rest, and if you think something will go wrong, you're absolutely right because when they enter, they encounter an ambush. Meanwhile, Kana and Ikuta keep talking, and he congratulates her for getting rid of religious fanaticism, which will help her follow the path of science. But there's no time to celebrate because Toak and his comrades are in dire straits. Yutori comes to the rescue, but despite taking care of a few enemies, the rest flee, and it was already too late for Toak. Kana and Ikuta arrive at the scene shortly after. Yutori chases the culprits but realizes it was a trap for another ambush and stops. The girl from earlier appears again. She still wants to reclaim her people's land and takes the opportunity to make things clear. Her name is Nanaku, from the Cynic, and all of this is part of a declaration of sacred war. After declaring war, they withdrew to Grand Alifatra. Safida is informed about this and decides to interpret the declaration of war as including the entire tribe. What does this mean? It means he wants to take the opportunity to carry out a purge. Meanwhile, Yutori and Ikuta talk about the sacred war. According to Ikuta, that term doesn't exist among the Cynic. For them, war is a method of survival, not considered good or bad, and therefore, not sacred. He deduces that someone else put the idea of war into their heads. Kana, while reading, recalls her last encounter with Ikuta, but her thoughts are interrupted when they are informed that they will go into combat against the Cynic. Don't they have a feeling that something bad will happen? Chamille thinks it's madness to attack their own citizens, but deep down, she only wishes for these 5 to return safely. Ikuta shows Torway what would be his trump card, these rifles. The battle begins, and Kana is in the midst of the fight, only wishing to see Ikuta for the 3rd time. Ikuta questions the way the army is deploying because the general ignored the fact that it would be cold as they are on a mountain. At one point, Ikuta starts teasing Suya shamelessly. First, his mother, and now her. 3 weeks have passed, and the battle continues. As mentioned before, the soldiers are having problems not only due to the cold but also because of the high altitude. One of them suggests retreating, but Safida insists on staying, believing they are facing mere mountain villagers. On the other side, we see Nanaku talking to a mysterious hooded figure who seems to be giving her certain orders to follow. Back with the group, they are tasked with supplying those in battle. Kana is not doing well, but her group reaches a suspiciously abandoned fortress, which they will use as a camp. Ikuta goes to see Haro, and she tells him he should tell the headquarters something. Ikuta supports her as he knows what she means, but there's not much time to talk because the enemy attacks, so they mobilize everyone. The higher-ups wanted to leave Ikuta and company in the defense zone, but he manages to convince them otherwise and becomes the leader. The enemy approaches, and at that moment, Matthew starts doubting and asks Ikuta how to be like him. Ikuta responds before saying goodbye with a handshake. The plan is to use the light spirits to blind the enemy, allowing them to attack without suffering too many casualties. Another squad, led by Yutori, joins the fight and takes out many more enemies. They suffered no casualties and annihilated almost all of them, making everyone wonder why they made the bots more challenging. Now back to Kana. She talks to this guy and tells him a bit about her life. She was married, and it was during that time that she began reading books. She remembers Ikuta again because he had read the same books as her. The suspiciously abandoned fortress was, in fact, a trap, and they are surrounded. By the next morning, the enemy had taken the camp. This guy wants to order Ikuta to attack at a numerical disadvantage. It's like they're purposely giving them bad orders. Anyway, Ikuta proposes to carry out a plan he devised, which would take only an hour to retake the camp with the help of his platoon. The plan is simple. Torway provides support from above and at a distance while they attack. They put the plan into action, and Torway takes out one after another using a modification in his rifle that makes the bullets fly straighter, a technology developed by Anneli. In less than an hour, they regain control of the camp. Here, Ikuta reveals something important to us. Despite being a deserter, Anneli doesn't want any single country to have a technological advantage, so he helps both sides to maintain balance. We already knew this because we are in 2023, but in their context, Torway gives his role a name, the sniper. But it's not all peace because the vanguard camp, which is quite far away, is requesting reinforcements as they were cornered. Ikuta decides not to tell anyone what's going on and acts on his own. With his platoon, they advance but not for long. He asks them to stop and camp there for a couple of days. Suya tries to reason with him, but they must stay to acclimate to the mountain's altitude, otherwise, they would lose oxygen. When they reach the fortress, unfortunately, there are no allies in sight. Everyone is dead, everyone, including Kana. Yes, she never got to see Ikuta for the third time. Farewell, Kana, we will always remember you. Ikuta gave them a victory with no casualties, but one decision led to this sad outcome. After all this, Ikuta and his companions go to the vanguard of the vanguard, where they are received by Senpa. The war is nearing its end, and they are following Safita's plan. They are assigned to a platoon led by Ikuta to burn down the villagers' houses, but nothing happens because the villagers will be relocated to another village. Initially, Safita's plan was to burn the houses and exterminate the inhabitants, but thanks to Senpa's intervention, the plan changed. Ikuta analyzes Safita's plan, which has flaws that will not only cost them but also the Synax. Ikuta relocates the villagers, and this enraged child attacks him. He tries to push him away, but accidentally injures him, making Dianken intervene and hit Ikuta, then himself, as a form of compensation. Taking advantage of the situation, Ikuta puts him in charge of relocating the villagers. A few days later, Safita prepares everyone for the final battle. The night before, they have dinner as usual, and Ikuta points out that they are not even half of those who started, and most didn't die from wounds but from altitude sickness. Here, Matthew mischievously starts asking Ikuta and Torway how they satisfied their needs. You know what he means. As fake as it sounds, Ikuta says he doesn't sleep with any officer because he respects the rules. If you find this hard to believe, I don't blame you, I do too. Everyone leaves and heads to the meeting point, and Senpa is confident because he believes they cannot attack them with anything lethal. Ikuta tells Senpa to ask Safita to dismount the horses for safety reasons. Meanwhile, the hooded figures make it clear that their target is Safita. This marks the beginning of the attack, and Nana reappears. To their surprise, they are attacked from afar with rifles. Dianken rescues Ikuta and Haro, while Yatori confronts Nana. Without many words, the fight begins. Nana's movements are quite unusual but effective. The hooded figures join the action, and Dianken prepares to attack them, but they prove to be too much for him, and they end up killing him. Yatori manages to restrain Nana, who had hidden her spirit beneath her cloak. Yatori noticed this because before the battle, Nana mentioned the name of her spirit, but it wasn't visible. The spirit decides to self-destruct right in front of Nana, and Yatori steps back to face the hooded figures, who disappear without a trace. Nana also manages to escape. Despite their efforts to save Dianken, it doesn't work, and he dies. Yatori gives him a dignified farewell. On the other side, Nana returns to her village, slightly injured, only to find that it has been set on fire. But that's not all. The war has completely spiraled out of control. However, before seeing all this, we are taken 9 years back, to the Cynic village during the Thanksgiving festival, where we are surprised to learn that Ikuta and Nana knew each other from before. Now, back to the present, the fire wasn't the worst of it. As Nana enters her house, she realizes that the soldiers killed her family, which drives her mad, and she starts attacking them. However, she is captured. Ikuta is aware of the situation and rushes to her aid, recognizing Nana. He asks the men to let her go and, after delivering a punch and a threat, they release her. This theoretically brings an end to the war. Spoiler, it doesn't, as the Synax won't be able to resist anymore. Ikuta mentions that his superiors handled everything disastrously and manages to identify the hooded figures from earlier. They are the Kara Kalem, a ghost unit belonging to Kioka's special forces, and based on their actions, Ikuta's theory is confirmed. The despicable old Safita is happy with how things turned out until a member of the Aldera Inspection Committee arrives. They were informed that the Aldera commandments were profaned in that region, and Safita's headquarters is held responsible. Safita asks them to arrest him, so they send the least tired people for the job, you know who. Ikuta and the rest realize that there's an entire army of Saya Alderamin, holding flags, which means they are on a sacred mission or, in other words, invading another country. Ikuta connects the dots and remembers that when Toak was killed, they found clothes of Aldera people at the crime scene, which the Synax used to disguise themselves. Kioka manipulated the Synax and made the Aldera people want to invade the Empire. Ikuta concludes that they must have a brilliant strategist on their side. In a meeting, Ikuta makes Senpa propose one of his ideas, leaving a support unit to delay the enemy. Yatori completes the plan, explaining that they intend to delay 12,000 soldiers using only 600 of their own. Ikuta puts forth a solution for the lack of manpower. They should recruit the Synax. For this, he must go see Nana, who doesn't recognize him yet and is understandably furious, considering they killed her family. Ikuta apologizes for everything they did to her and, as a form of compensation, cuts off a finger and tells her a story she had told him when they were children. It is at this moment that Nana realizes that he is Ikuta. Ikuta explains everything to her and tells her that even though they will fight against Aldera, those behind it all are the people of Kioka. He promises Nana and the Synax a place in the Empire in exchange for their alliance, and they agree to send 800 more men. Senpa meets with the whole group and announces that Ikuta and Yatori have been promoted to first lieutenants, while the rest have been promoted to second lieutenants. It's all nice, except they still have a war to fight. Ikuta plans for only him and Yatori to go to war while the others leave. But do you really think Torway, Matthew, and Haro will just sit around doing nothing? The first phase of the war begins 2 days later, and Ikuta's plan is to set the entire forest on fire to stop the enemy. However, the old Alderamin finds it amusing. After that, the two mention a certain kid who is an invited officer. Later, Ikuta is informed that the enemy has started acting and set another fire. Despite Aldera being a peaceful country, with Kioka's help, they are capable of much more, especially with the invited officer. Speaking of him, Yatori heard about a Kioka officer who was sent to Saya Alderamin, and it turns out to be that white-haired guy who is known for not sleeping and seems to be Ikuta's nemesis, the prodigy named Jean Alkinix. Jean is aware that Safita is not the one giving orders, and he is happy to have a worthy rival. It has been a month since the war started, and Chamille is informed of everything. Jean joins the battlefront, while on the other hand, Ikuta tells Senpa not to fear the Carakalum. Night falls, and they cover the forest. For the first time, Ikuta doubts whether he will be able to win or not. A group approaches them, so they decide to attack first. They use rifles, and then Yatori engages in close combat with the Synax. Jean is confident that his plan will work. Matthew is injured, but it's not serious. Nana and the Synax are in a bad position, so Ikuta considers whether to help them or not. After thinking about Yatori, he decides to stop hiding and starts working together with them. Left and right hands. Temporarily, they retreat, blocking with fire. Although they lost many men, Jean remains confident. Suya gets upset because 3 of her acquaintances died in the war, and she doesn't quite agree with saving the Synax after the previous mission was to kill them. But she calms down eventually. The Carakalum will act again, and one of them swallows a note for some reason. At this point, the battle becomes even more intense. Being no fool, the despicable old Safita escapes first, and Chamille confronts him. Jean is informed that the Katjvarna army has an Igsem, and he believes that all the strategic planning is her work. Nana apologizes to Suya, they make amends, and Suya doesn't want to keep killing people. Senpa helps her not to burden herself with guilt. On the other hand, Ikuta is up to his antics, sleeping on a heap of straw right in the middle of the war. A group of 500 Aldera horsemen departs towards them, so Ikuta proposes sending an interception unit. Senpa and Torway's men get ready to go. Haro notices a balloon in the sky, and Jean is inside it. Ikuta didn't expect this, but he decides not to give it much importance and emphasizes that they need 7 days to retreat. It's reported to Ikuta that the dirigible is hovering around the same area. In the interception unit, Torway requests to deploy his platoon in the rear, which proves to be perfect since the Carakalum are there preparing to fire their slightly different rifles. But they don't have time to do so because Torway and his men have them in their sights, killing a few and forcing the rest to retreat. In reality, this was planned beforehand by Ikuta, who anticipated the Carakalum's attack and arranged for it to happen that way. Here, Ikuta and Yatori have a moment in which he emphasizes that he joined the army for her, wanting to help her make decisions for a better future. Remember the balloon that was going back and forth? They were scouting the area to bring in those solar energy cannons. Moreover, the Aldera people managed to penetrate the forest fire. They have only 2 days left to complete the retreat. They are in a bad situation, and Ikuta blames himself and decides to do something about it. He temporarily leaves Matthew in charge and highlights that the most important thing is for them to survive. The order is to live and reunite in 3 days. Left and right hands, along with a platoon, set out to confront the Aldera soldiers. There's a passage the enemy could use, so Ikuta plans the best way to hold them back. Night falls, and Jean plans to cross the passage, but they encounter what seems to be an obvious trap, given the smell of oil that gave them away. Jean doesn't care and is about to ask them to fire, but surprise. The trap is actually a trap for him because hidden among the straw is Ikuta and many others, who surprise the soldiers and take them out one by one. The soldiers in the back think they will be saved, but Yatori sends them off to meet their maker. On the other hand, Jean is completely frustrated for being outmaneuvered in such a way. Jean realizes that they are raising a surrender flag, but he refuses to accept it on the terms they might propose. Ikuta is almost killed, but the fight stops. Finally, Jean decides to accept the surrender. Yatori steps forward to meet Jean and makes it clear that she is not the one in command, but Ikuta is. Jean requests an unconditional surrender to avoid further casualties, but Ikuta declines. Jean tries to instill fear, but Ikuta's surrender terms are for them to leave through the forest. Ikuta threatens to finish them if they don't accept the terms, stating that he's not willing to die, but if they fight, they will be the ones who win. Jean starts to waver, and to make matters worse, Kuss points a light at him. Ikuta signals Torway to fire, which would end Jean's life. Jean is at a crossroads, but still, he refuses to surrender. In fact, the entire war was like a massive game of shogi for Ikuta. With the threat of Torway's shot still in place, Jean decides to accept the surrender, even though he doubts there's anyone there to shoot him. He's right, Torway is not there. Jean and Ikuta bid farewell, bringing an end to the war. All the soldiers return, and Chamille visits them, relieved that all 5 of them are safe. Some time later, justice is served, and the despicable old Safida is put on trial for his war crimes against the Synax, resulting in his execution. Chamille talks to Ikuta and asks him for something unexpected to restore order in Katjvarna. She wants him to rise to the top and lose a war. Yes, you heard it right. Chamille wants to restructure the entire empire from within. The story ends with Ikuta and Yatori standing back to back. Now, with a pending war that they must lose, the now known lazy undefeated general prepares his next move. And that's how the first season of this anime ends. If you've reached this part of the video, let me tell you that you've been one of the few people to make it this far. So comment the word soldier in the comments. Remember to subscribe to not miss any videos. With that said, see you in the next video.